I'm assuming you're a Christian, maybe even a member of this church. You do understand that when death occurs, that the person is allowed to remarry. So right. I don't know that it is helpful that you're taking such a stance towards your father, in fact, even though you're still talking to him, but you state categorically that you do not talk to, respect your new wife. So essentially, even if you, what? You said what?
Except if there's something big. Maybe my dad marries, my mom dies, my dad marries someone else, and I love her, embrace her, welcome her into the family, and she starts doing stuff. I mean, maybe that's basis for it.
Well, again, I will answer you as a Christian. If you're a Christian, this is not a stance to take, as Pastor Mark has been saying. But anyway, we can discuss this afterwards. Next question: is it compulsory for the husband to be theologically sound to lead family devotions? Can the wife sometimes lead the devotions even when the husband is present?
It's a great question. That's a great question. Okay.
Is it compulsory for the husband to be theologically sound to lead family devotions? Can the wife sometimes lead the devotions even when the husband is present?
Okay. I think this falls in the category of something, though it's not explicitly prohibited in the scriptures, that by virtue of the husband is the head of his wife, and by when you take even the implication of 1 Peter 3 that your prayers may not be hindered, live with your wives according to knowledge, that it is most natural for the husband to take the lead. That doesn't mean he has to read every passage of Scripture. Sometimes my wife and I, when we have time together in the Lord, if we're tight on time, I might be reading something to her, and then I say, honey, will you just close us in prayer? Does that make sense? We both contribute to the spiritual exercise. But again, I would think that would be a second choice. But I think a wise husband engages his wife and children to participate, not to be passive spectators in family worship. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just read to you from Deuteronomy chapter 6. And after the Shema in verse 4, verse 6, these words which I am commanding you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your sons, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontals on your forehead. You shall write them on the doorsteps of your house and on your gates. Now, verse 3, O children, O Israel, you should listen and be careful to do it, that it may be well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, just as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you in the land flowing with milk and honey. Now, it doesn't explicitly say fathers here, but I think that it's the general leaning, especially when you consider Ephesians 6, where fathers are explicitly mentioned as being responsible for raising their children in the admonition and fear of the Lord. So, theologically sound, I suppose, when we use that phrase, we're referring to he knows Calvin's Institute. If that's what you're thinking about, and I don't know that that's the case, he should know the Bible enough to lead his family. Any Christian husband should do that. So that's what I would add. As regards having children, would it be wrong for a new couple to wait for a while and prepare themselves for having children or a child?
It's a great question. It's a great question. So first, right, when we think of hermeneutics, there's the general principle, there's principle and practice. And one thing, a good hermeneutic is always to ask, what is the principle that's in force here, even if the practice is not clear? So the principle is marriage and children go together, like this, It's that first command, be fruitful and multiply. And so then we are left to, as a couple, accountable to the Lord to think through, where are we? So for example, our 32-year-old daughter, who I think will get married sometime around her 33rd birthday. In the U.S. now, if you're 35 or 34 and you get pregnant, that's called a geriatric pregnancy. It's like you're old having a baby or whatever, okay. So in that case, versus a couple getting married at 22, you might have a little different counsel, okay. My own take as a pastor is I love seeing couples who are married not get pregnant right away, but to establish rhythms. This is my own personal perspective. Their own rhythms in their initial roles as husbands and wives for a time. I'm not saying that needs to be 5 years, but even whether it's 6 months or a year, so that they're learning how to live together without the added responsibility of a child. Yeah, but we can't make that say that legislatively. I think it's a matter of wisdom, relative wisdom, good, better, best. We say.
Thank you. The next question: when Paul says those who have wives should live as though they have none, what does he mean?
Well, some wives would say to their husbands, you're living like you don't have a wife. Well, okay, I saw a few nods there. All right, yeah. Can we keep this simple? Right, I think you relate to this. We lived for 6 years in China. And while we were in China, 12 to 13 hours ahead of the U.S., we had 4 children, and then we had a granddaughter, and I still had a business my first year and a half, and we still had our house, and my brother and I had a rental property, and we had a church that sent us, and I always felt like I was living with 1 foot in Asia and 1 foot in North America. Okay, you know what that's like. Okay. So you'd wake up in the morning or end your night talking back with people in the U.S., like that type of thing. I think he's saying, don't forget that marriage is temporary. Marriage is, it's this, as John Piper says, this momentary marriage. And so in a sense, the sweetness of that, rather than that being frustrating, as though, that's not advocating, right, that we're to neglect each other, but that we are to come alongside each other and remind one another that our marriage is constantly making statements about who God is and the great marriage to come, the greater reality that this momentary marriage points to. And guess what? Here's the sweetest thing. Here's a secret to long marriage. And I know Pastor Tony and Ori would say this. When you live with your mate, and your mate is not your ultimate reality, is not who you look for ultimate joy and satisfaction, then marriage is all the more sweeter. Anytime you put more on something than it can take, it breaks. And if you are looking to your spouse or to future marriage to give you what you think you are not receiving from God alone, that's an error. Does that make sense? You track it. That's what's sweet. I'll go back and have a great reunion Wednesday with Cheryl. I hadn't seen her for 16 days. It'll be sweet, I promise, okay? But it's sweet because I don't regard that union as the sweetest. And because I don't, it's all the more sweeter. That's a secret.
I think they're in trouble by the word sweet they're using. So I think I'll add what Joe Bike says, and he says that for husbands, God first, wife second, you last. And for wives, God first, husband second, and you last. And essentially, if Christ is preeminent, then, as Mark is saying, then things will fall into their appropriate places. I think this is the last question I have here, unless other ones are coming through. As singles, what qualities should we be looking for in a woman when choosing a wife?
Thank you so much. You threw that like baseball right down the middle of the plate, because I was talking with Brother Courage about this earlier. Okay. So let me recommend the book Not Yet Married by Marshall Segal. Marshall Segal. So 10 years ago, I began to think about this more deeply as we had lots of singles in China from the United States, all over the world. And I finally realized one day when a young 27-year-old said to me, how do we as women pursue marriage? If men are supposed to make the first move, what do we do? And I said to her what I said to Courage a while ago, which is the way we pursue marriage is by preparing for marriage ourselves. It's not about developing a 12 or 15 point, got to have non-negotiable qualities that you probably couldn't even meet yourself, okay? But it's about becoming the man or woman that is marriageable. You run hard after God. And even what I said, do you mind if I kind of repeat a little bit of that? Yeah. The idea of you grow, you learn, you take care of your body, you steward your body, your soul, your money, your relationships. You be a master at cultivating relationships in the body, because this is your nursery. The church is your nursery for how to live in love, in relationship. And so, like when you ask the 5 pre-engagement questions about should you marry someone, there's only 5 questions before you would be engaged. Number 1, are they a Christian? Number 2, are you generally headed the same direction in life? Number 3, does this person have a track record of solving conflict biblically? Number 4, what is the assessment of my friends and family who know and love me best? Do they think that person and together it's synergistic? We make each other better in the Lord? And then the 5th thing is the question of free will, of volition. Do you want to marry that person? Or do you feel squeezed? I'm getting old. If I don't get married, this is not a good guy, but time's passing me by. Okay. So I would say, was that from a guy?
Well, I believe so. Well, he said as singles. Then he asked the question, what should you be looking out for in a woman?
Okay, so that sounds like a guy.
It has to be a guy.
So before you establish a list of criteria for the woman, that ideal Proverbs 31 woman you want to marry, create the list for yourself first. Are you growing in selflessness? Are you a servant? Do you burn through relationships like a hot knife through butter, or do you cultivate them? Do you understand my question? Do you keep them fresh? Oh, you meet conflict. Do you work that out, or do you just go on to the next? You burn through them. Are you responsible with? Are you vocationally? If you're a man, are you cultivating your God-given gifts, your ability to provide for a family as a principal breadwinner? Do you have relationships where you're known, where your brother, if you're a man, you have brothers in Christ who know you, love for you, can pray for you. So you're just doing that, right? So all of this preps you well. But I would say, here's another thing. I dare, if you're single, to go to your pastors, Pastor Tony, Pastor Osi, and say, I really want to be married. It's like the guy that says, I'd love to be an elder 5 years from now, 10 years from now. What advice do you have? What do I need to work on? What do you see? And understand, they're not going to give you maybe the exhaustive, but how about a point or two? And then trust them. Man, I look at Pastor Tony, I met Ori, and think, how sweet. I hope I'm like him when I'm 78. That's what I want to be like. I want to be like Tony Okoro. Okay. So, did I say his name right? Okay. That's great. Okay. Start with you. To pursue marriage is not fundamentally to be out with binoculars and trying to look for women that have the 14 qualities that even you don't meet up. It's to pursue yourself. All right? Is that helpful? Yeah. And see, I mentioned this to Courage. There's so much about that person coming around that's out of your control. What's in your side of the table is becoming the most marriageable, Christ-like person you can be.
Same person asks, is it possible to have a blissful marriage considering the negative report we hear about marriage? Should I answer?
Yeah. I was going to joke, when I can answer that, I'll let you know, or something stupid like that. The other thing we like to say is, like, I've been married 37 years, 32 wonderful years, and people are like, what about the other 5? Yes. Yes. And I think blissful marriage does not mean perfect marriage or a lack of conflict or troubles. But I think, as we talked about 2 Corinthians 12:9, my grace is sufficient for you, that you realize you cannot live out Christian marriage without God's daily grace. And you know, we say, give us this day our daily bread, give us this day our daily grace. Never more so in marriage, because the thing with marriage, like children, right, it draws down the level of the lake, and it reveals our impatience, our selfishness. And I think if I was 22 and not married, I would want to be able to sit and talk with Osi and Ninya, your other pastor, Pastor Tony and Ori, and I would try to level my expectation of what does a blissful, happy marriage. Does that mean no trouble, no conflict? Of course not. It's saying, it's keeping that commitment of, I choose you, and you choose me, and we did that before God and witnesses. And the intent of marriage was one man, one woman, for life. And if that, where God directs, God provides. Does that point? And so we're not saying it's easy, but I have great, it's just this, I'm surely the Orokas have been married longer than us, but marriage is like food that gets better with age over a few days. We say in the U.S. like wine, it gets better with age, like cheese. It just does. I look at Cheryl now, and one of the things is what's transformative to me is to see, like, she's beautiful on the outside to me, but it's what's inside that just emanates, and I think that she's Christ-like, she's unselfish, she loves others, she's faithful, and I love seeing her grow in that, to see the transformation of her becoming more and more Christ-like in these years of marriage. It is possible. It is not easy. It is possible by God's grace.
So I'd like to add that, the person says, considering the negative report we hear, I think you are listening to, I don't know what sources you're getting those negative. I mean, there are certainly negative reports, but the Lord said, take heed how you hear. If you're in a church like this, I don't think you're hearing negative reports about marriage. All right. Next person. What did you mean when you said multiply is different from add when talking about procreation? So they brought it from our men's meeting in here.
Yeah. Did I say that in the men's meeting or
you
up
said
here?
it here.
Yeah, okay.
That's good. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the multiply, if we may use it as a comparison, we know that numbers multiplied is greater than numbers added, right? So if you take 3 plus 3, that's 6, right? But 3 times 3 is 9. Okay. So it's not to specify a certain number, but it is to here's the enduring principle, fruitfulness. And by the way, this is not to bind anyone. I'm a fan, when I do premarital counseling, I encourage people where they can so be careful, even numbers of children. And the reason is that everybody has a buddy. That's right. Sometimes with odd numbers, you can have two and then one feels left behind. But you didn't pay anything for that, so don't act like that is priceless, okay? But, the numbers of children is, you've got to gauge, right? Like some of you, did any of you ever start marriage thinking we want 5 or 6 kids, but after 2 you thought, woo, baby, yeah, okay, you just, right. It was Mike Tyson, the great heavyweight fighter. He said, everyone thinks they're tough until they take a punch in the face. Everyone thinks they want lots of kids until they have them. My dad used to say, the only experts about raising children are those that don't have any, okay? And I think it's like, it's kind of like having children. So I think just prayerfully discerning what is your station in life, your energy level. Did you start having, were you married later? Did pregnancy totally take the wind out of your wife's sails? Or if you see, hey, my wife's fantastically patient. We had 3 children. She wants more, and she seems to go. You're free. Yeah, you're free. I don't mind. Yeah. Anyway.
There's a fan club of women that want more children.
There's a fan club of women here that want more children. So did I. I wanted more. I wanted more than 4, but the Lord just left us with 4. We wanted more.
All right. Now, this person asks, I don't know, I think it's a strange question. How do you measure your quiver to know whether it's full?
Well, since there's no such thing as a real physical quiver, the measuring of the quiver is the valuation of your capacity to raise children. If there were criteria is raise, right, in the Lord, then we just got to do that, and with judgment, yeah.
Apostle Paul says it is not good for a man to touch a woman.
Yep.
You said that a single brother may be comforted by an embrace. By whom, sir?
Okay. Okay, so let's step back just for a moment. That it's good when the Corinthians wrote Paul, it's not good.
The question is not finished. And if by a single sister, would she not be misunderstood?
Yeah.
Also, would a girl's embrace not stir up some inordinate desire rather in him or even in both?
No, I really mean brother to brother, woman to woman. I think, and I'm not saying, I have Christian women that come up and touch my arm and say, thanks for the message, or like this. I don't push them away or act like, how dare you. But let me say this, and this is for marrieds and singles. You must discern and know in yourself when there's a member of the opposite sex, whether you're single or married, and to know that person, when I talk to them, I feel a little like that person's attractive to me. You need to be wise. So wives, I'm going to tell you this. If your husband comes to you and says, hey, I can only talk to this other woman when you're holding my hand and with me, all you need to say is, gotcha. Does that make sense? Just allow each other the honesty to say, that sister over there, like I need you with me when I talk with her. That's it. Does that make sense? Just, if you can't be honest with your mate about that stuff, I'm not sure. Anyway. What's he saying?
I don't mind her. All right, last question. Most singles today view marriage as an objective. In our culture, society generally frowns at singles. What should the view on marriage be? Should there be any type of prioritizing this institution, or does it not matter given 1 Corinthians 7? I think this is your sermon.
I think my sermon really addressed that. That's
Yeah.
right.
So maybe-
Yeah, we say marriage is not a reward for holiness. You're no less complete as a person. You're no less human. You're no less a Christian because you're single. Okay.
The capacity you spoke about regarding having children, do you mean physical, financial, the woman's ability to desire, the woman's ability or desire for more children?
I would say a bit of yes to all. So we taught earlier, men, one of the greatest gifts that your wife brings to marriage is this gift of fertility, okay? That's a gift, right? And so all truths are held in tension. That's what makes a tightrope effective, because there's pull this side and this, okay? And so there are times maybe, have you ever wanted something that wasn't good for you to want? Okay. And or this is a false thing. False logic, we talked about this earlier. Something is good, therefore more is better. Okay. As a husband and wife, so for example, it's very simple. It's Ninya and Osi that together prayerfully in conversation have to assess what is our life, what's non-negotiable is that they are called to raise Zipporah and Gad in the fear and admonition of the Lord. And they ought, as they do that, and they have a sense of what that entails, they cannot say, well, in self-assessment, we think that we're generally living that out in a manner pleasing to the Lord, but whether it's money, and I'm not saying money in the sense that we need to buy children every luxury, and that if we can't, we ought not to have more children. I'm not saying that. Okay, so we've established that. But I think it's a sober self-assessment. Can we faithfully parent these children? Or in the case of a wife that's absolutely whipped, just is lagging, would it be gracious for a husband to say, give me another child when the woman is really tired, struggling, whatever? I mean, there's complications, right? It's like our daughter, I was explaining this to Nina, almost died at the birth of their first child. She bled out. She had and received 25 units of blood. And I had always hoped they would give us more children, and gratefully they've given us another granddaughter after that. But the doctor said, you need to wait at least 2 years before you get pregnant, because she was in intensive care, very serious, could have died 5 years ago. But so there's all those things: health, energy, age, yeah, I think, but that's for the couple to do. That's not for anyone else to pressure them. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. All right. Thank you for
Thank
coming.
you.